Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Gist, a new limited series powered by Energy Central, covering the big, bold, and impactful technological developments in geospatial information systems that are permanently altering the modern power grid. I'm Energy Central Community Manager and your host for this series, Matt Chester. So, we're now on to our second episode of this show, all about GIS. And there's an important distinction we need to make right off the bat. GIS, it's not just about maps. It's the brains behind smarter asset management, faster outage response, and more efficient field operations. And that's what we're tackling in today's episode. Joining us is Ryan Ciesielski, Group Head of Geospatial at National Grid. For years, Ryan has been helping the military, utilities, and critical infrastructure organizations take geospatial data from a technical function to a true business asset, unlocking the full power of GIS to modernize aging infrastructure and prepare for the grid of the future. Today, we're diving into GIS for asset management. There's a ton to cover, and we've got a top-tier guest to help us do it. So, without further ado, Ryan, welcome to The Gist.
Thank you. Good to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, we're thrilled you're here. And let's just start off with the basics. Can you share with us a bit about your background and what first drew you to applying GIS tech within the utility sector?
Sure. Yeah. So my career spans, about 24 years. So therefore my career split into two halves. My first career was in the armed forces. I was in the Royal Engineers as a geospatial engineer, ultimately. I did that for 12 years and I headed up Head of Geospatial for UK Special Forces. So I was privileged to access amazing data and technology and derive true geospatial intelligence. So I had that experience in all things geospatial, and I was naturally attracted to utilities because it's critical national infrastructure. It's the same sort of, the same sort of problem statements that you experience when you're in the armed forces, kind of like that country level problem statement, the geography, whether it be human geography, physical geography, and all of the constraints. Geography is dynamic, the moving environment's dynamic, and there's lots of like lift and shift sort of skills and experiences that I could apply to utilities. It was quite an easy transition, to be honest, because the military, big problems to tackle, CNI, utilities, big problems to tackle.
Excellent. That's really interesting to hear how they connect so well. And that sounds to me then that you've been on that GIS train kind of ahead of the curve of a lot of the utility sector. So given that, you've witnessed a lot of evolution in the power sector in the past decade plus, and specifically grid modernization, how have you seen the role of GIS evolve along with that, change in the power sector?
I think I've got my answers probably in two parts for that. The first one would be when I joined utilities, I wasn't taken aback, but I was surprised how utilities were using GIS. In my role at National Grid, and also I also work with other utilities and in certain capacity. So I thought they'd be doing more. It was used more as a visualization tool. It was more like a point-to-point problem solver. We need a map or a visualization for the specific use case. For the regulator, for instance, or to visualize where our customers are or what have you. So I thought they'd be doing more. But then there was an explosion, I would say maybe within the last 5 years. And I've been driving that from National Grid's perspective. But what I've seen is, and this is the second part, and it's weird that you just kind of touched on this on the previous sort of question, is use cases that were predominantly very, very mature in other domains, such as the military, and again, I'm speaking for both the UK and the US because I worked in both. Is that those use cases that were viable, mature, tested, are now viable use cases in utilities many years later, 10 years later. Yeah. So, and that's because data and technologies come on so far, sensors and satellites that might have been classified or, secret military domain. We now have commercial satellites with excellent resolution. We now have the fourth industrial revolution. We've got so much data, and, IoT, real-time data feeds, climate feeds, weather feeds, you name it. So that's the biggest difference. And now, and then just to wrap that up. So now it's all about it's not just a visualization type tool. It's now geospatial data and analytics. It's an operational and a strategic necessity to incorporate into your workflow now from a utilities perspective. The value has been proven.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense. You see the power sector is traditionally thought of as pretty conservative, and they want to see the proof of concept first. And maybe the military applications, that's where you have innovation going that civilians like myself wouldn't even know are happening. So you kind of get to stand on the shoulders of those lessons already learned.
Yeah. Those use cases, they're behind closed doors, but the reality is, as the open and availability of amazing commercial data sets, that's the transformation there. It's that anyone can do advanced analytics now.
And so you mentioned when you first got to the utility sphere, you're kind of surprised how much wasn't being done. And I think a lot of power professionals probably still think of GIS mainly as a mapping tool. But can you get into more specifics about the true power that it has as an asset management tool today?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a huge question, right? So just what to do is just like prompt me into certain areas because it's huge. The one thing, just start at the top level and respectfully call out that asset management companies, utilities, electric, gas, transmission, distribution, renewables, they're huge businesses. They're connected into critical national infrastructure, and that's not an issue, but it's a thing. They're designed to be resilient by default, resilient by design. So you can't apply change very easily or very quickly. Yeah. And it took me a long time to get my head around that. And I'm glad that I'm in that space now. But that's the reason why, because I did, going back to what I said, is that I thought they'd be doing more. But the reason why that was, it just takes a long time for them to then see innovations that are happening elsewhere and stuff to get up to speed. But they're certainly doing it now. Now, from an asset management perspective, there's so much going on in the geospatial space. You can break it down into two parts. Yeah, you've got your kind of data twin view. So we're analyzing all of the sort of external data sets, deriving analytics in real time to make informed decisions from a grid planning and maintenance perspective. So that whole asset operations sort of vertical, it's kind of like we can plan, predict, and maintenance activities across a network, but at scale using geospatial analytics, external data and internal data. So not just, the visualization piece, proper advanced geospatial analytics, spatial analysis, and so on as well.
And are you seeing that lead to tangible extensions of maybe the lifespan of these assets because you're kind of more on top of the data?
Yeah. Look, I'll give you a cool example, right? The in the US, and this is another thing too, is that, like, for instance, I work at National Credit Super Group. Yeah, it's got business units in the UK, it's got business units in the US. What might be a viable geospatial use case in the UK might not be viable in the US, and vice versa. But in the US, there was a use case to do vegetation management, so predictive vegetation management at scale, using satellite data and artificial intelligence to speed up the end-to-end workflow. So the old school way, and again, look, I'm not scripted here. I recently did this previously, giving examples at conferences, but there used to be, the saying is, let's do the right miles at the right time. And, in vegetation management, you don't want vegetation touching overhead lines. It'll cause an outage. There'll be reputational damage, financial impact, fines, and so on, and outage impact. But using satellite data and AI, you can predict based on the species of the tree, the local ecology and climate that tree sits in. You can predict the growth, and so you know when to go there and trim it, as opposed to doing a temporal sort of time-based maintenance schedule. Let's go around this district every 6 months, every 9 months, and so on. So what you're doing is you're doing the right miles at the right time because you're using predictive analytics. And that's huge. Like stats wise, just off the top of my head, it was kind of like 30% or something, and outage times being reduced. And so there was like really big numbers because that use case out there, the assets are more distributed, they're less dense, so they're over a larger area. So therefore, using satellite analytics, given it was a bigger geography, made more sense. So, I mean, that's a good use case. So vegetation management using space data and AI.
Yeah, so you're both able to tackle it from the preventative measure of, that vegetation management, but also the quick response times in terms of, there is an outage. Can we ID quickly where it is, why it's happening, and get teams out there?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's like a second piece. That's kind of like your ADMS, your advanced distribution management systems with sensors. But that's probably, that's another topic in itself.
So with all these, great opportunities and great tools for utilities to utilize, no doubt there are still some of the power companies that don't have an integrated GIS asset management system. And when you come across those, what do you think are some of the biggest pain points that they're going to end up facing if they're not getting on board with these tools today?
I mean, integration sounds like a really boring word, right? But ultimately, if it's not integrated, it's duplicated, right? That's what I say to everyone, right? Just to put a bit of amusement on the subject. But ultimately, geospatial data and technology, it's the invisible thread, that connects, the asset management lineage across an organization. So if things aren't integrated at the right level, then there's obviously going to be duplication of efforts because different systems, silos, they'll be doing their own thing with no control, no sort of integration governance across it. So therefore, things come out of sync really quickly. It becomes a mess. There's lots of rework, and it's a very difficult, your sort of data strategy is very difficult to maintain. If it's not from an architectural perspective, there's no integration. Architecture exists. You're going to be redoing things multiple times in different places, come out of sync. And then do you trust your data? If you integrate it to a certain degree, then you've got that sort of single source of the truth on the stuff that you trust.
Yeah, no, that sounds critical, and I think would compel anybody who's not on board with it to be like, all right, I need to start integrating this. So I kind of make it tangible, and if you could walk us through maybe a real world example where GIS has been introduced, made a significant impact on asset management outcomes. What has that process been like of getting it off the ground and then seeing the results delivered?
At one point, when I was consulting, just not too long after I left the forces, was working for a gas transmission company, country level, and basically we did lots of digital transformation projects which focused on geospatial data design. But when you're doing anything in utilities, it's all about, right, okay, why we're doing this, what's the value in doing it? Is it a financial value or a non-financial value? What's the return of investment I'm going to get? So I'll give you an example on that one. So I led the geospatial data design on digital transformation projects, a couple of them. It took 12 months. And at the end of that, I designed a geospatial data twin, a country level network-wide geospatial data twin. And what that resulted in was better asset investment planning decisions. But the ROI was in the region of 700%. So we spent a couple of £1 million, and then, they recouped about 12.5, 13 billion pounds in return. From an asset management perspective, they would never be able to do that unless they understood that you're going to have to redesign your geospatial data to be more efficient, more performant, which represents the network. And once you do that and you trust it and it's accurate and it's integrated to the right degree, you can then build things like geospatial data twins. And once you do that, they can then solve really big network-wide problems, whether it be in asset investment planning, monetize risk, from a resilience perspective and so on. So yeah, there's lots and lots of ways to look at it. But at the end of the day, it always comes down to ROI. What's the value? Because we can analyze anything, but what's the value in analyzing it? Is it financial or non-financial?
Yeah, and another area that I'm guessing comes up is from the regulatory side as well, in terms of having the data, being able to report it. Can you talk a little bit about how GIS helps utilities in their documentation, their reporting, and justifying asset maintenance and replacement programs?
Yeah. So I think there's like a common thread through a lot of the stuff we've spoke about so far, and it's data and technology. There's a lot of it. There's an abundance of it. It's there to be used. There's open stuff. There's commercial stuff. The regulators know that. The regulators are clever. They've got excellent people in their teams that understand geospatial data and technology as well. So it's kind of like when you're back at school, right? When you do a maths test and you don't show your workings, you might have got the answer right, but you didn't show that you truly understand how you got the answer. That's exactly the way I describe it for us now with the relationship we have with regulators. They want to understand that you've truly thought through every scenario. They want to understand it, but then they want to see it. So this is where geospatial data and technology comes in. We can do all the geospatial analysis, understand all those different data sets, the external factors, the impacts. We can do the analysis from an engineering perspective and the geographical perspective. But then we've got the opportunity now to visualize it in digital twin software. So we can then present it to them in a centralized sort of visualization tool, so they can pan around, query stuff, interrogate stuff, ask questions. But then we can take it one step further. We can do immersive environments now. We can do AR or VR. So what we're doing is you're given more of the visual thing. I know we overuse sayings in the past, like, picture paints 1,000 words, but it is true, right? If you can see it, you can interrogate it, you can interact with it, that means you're going to understand it. So therefore, it's providing that transparent, open approach with the regulator. We know what we're doing. We've analysed it. We've done the scenarios, and this is what it looks like ahead of time before it's built.
So you're making a great case here about how and why the utilities need to dive in and really take advantage of these tools. But like I mentioned earlier, I'm sure we still have some utility listeners or utility leaders listening in today who they're maybe early on in that journey, or maybe they're still waiting to take that first step into GIS. So being as entrenched as you are here, what would be the advice you have for utility that's just now starting to shift from paper-based or siloed systems towards that fully enterprise GIS approach?
Yeah, the advice I would give is the business angle first. Make sure you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Is there value in you disrupting something that you've been doing for a while? If it's part of your core business process whereby it's a value lever for your organization, then target the biggest value first, but do it in chunks. So work in a really agile manner, whereby you're doing something, you're showing the value really quickly, and that will help you getting the rest of your business stakeholders on board that, yeah, look, we know what we're doing. We've got a problem. We broke it down into a little chunk. Here's the value. And then that's it. As soon as you make a success and you show the value in doing it, then that's when you can start building out a wider geospatial data technology strategy. Don't be afraid to lean on a globally trusted partner who has decades of experience in doing so. They're the ones that you can trust. They'll get you on your geospatial roadmap. Because it's all about value, start small and then grow. So, don't try and go from zero to hero. Build up that organic geospatial knowledge in your organization. Start small, go big. Get your own permanent resource in, a geospatial manager who's on the journey from the start. So therefore, you've got that organic intellect that why decisions have been made, and then make sure that you build out your own strategy in-house that works for you at your pace.
That's you lined up a great checklist there, so I'm sure that our listeners are going to be jotting that down. And that's perfect for encapsulating what they need to be doing today. But now, if you'll indulge me, I want to look at the future and the utility of tomorrow. As we mentioned earlier, it's evolving quickly. It's different from how it looked in the past. So as you look ahead at these continued changes in the power industry, how do you see a GIS supporting utilities as they adapt to things like more DERs on the grid, EV charging infrastructure being critical, generalized decentralization of the power generation? What does GIS look like amid all of that?
Yeah, it's a really good one, right? And it's tough because the goalposts are not just moving, they're growing. There's so much, right? That space is getting bigger, but the space is being filled with new opportunities, but new opportunities present more challenges, right? So if I was to think about the future and understand all of the sort of, the assets and the connection types, I would probably say, and then again, this is probably more targeted towards a maturer utility, if you know what I mean, would be, it's going to be difficult to change your foundational enterprise GIS system. Yeah, because it's going to be connected to some really important services like control rooms and critical services and so on, right? And it's going to have critical customers like hospitals or what have you connected to it. So I'd have two strategies. I'd have your foundational GIS, enterprise GIS strategy, which manages and maintains core systems. But then I would set up an agile geospatial center of excellence, whereby within the center of excellence, you're then orchestrating sort of, agile geospatial data or technology products to support specific use cases that are emerging. So they've got the agility to do so. You can do it fast and quick and show the value and connect that customer or analyze that new opportunity in terms of if it's an offshore wind farm or a new opportunity for a battery storage site. Be agile about it. Set up specific teams with a specific geospatial product thinking approach to solve the problem, but don't let that interfere with your foundational enterprise GIS architecture, so and I think having agility is probably it's the way to succeed and to do it quickly. Get the right people with the right skills and the right roles, but give them the freedom of movement to use their talents and use their expertise and their innovative sort of, vava-room that they've got to solve a problem, right? And do it in a team. That digital product thinking mindset, that obviously works for geospatial. We've been creating geospatial products for a long time. But so yeah, do that. Small, effective teams.
No, that's wonderful. And you kind of touched upon what I wanted to ask in my last question here, but I think you're probably thinking realistically. So if I could take the chains off and say, hey, resources are unlimited, what would be the kind of GIS initiatives you would want to see every utility implement to future-proof their asset management program? So I think a lot of what you just said would fall into there, but if the pool of funds was unlimited, how do we make sure that these programs continue to be valuable and useful and on target?
I think if we ignored regulatory constraints and anti-competition laws and all that, if we're to delete everything that didn't exist, it would be, especially with my experience and seeing the value in it, would be the open geospatial data twin, which would be foundational for the visual piece, just so that you have that, networks are sat within networks, yeah? And those networks are part of bigger networks. Everything's connected in geospatial, It could be spatial and non-spatial relationships, but it's still connected. So therefore, I think, in order to, set the future generations up for success, in terms of, the energy transition, climate resilience, cheaper bills, it's just to have that open, connected, self-healing geospatial network approach that considers climate, human factors and all that good stuff. I just so it's more open. But again, that would be difficult, but I don't care. But if it was open, connected, everyone had amazing geospatial data governance, connected topological networks so we could do real-time organic tracing networks that listen to things and feel things that are going on, demand, people are going to a football match, we know how to do stuff, surge demand, all that good stuff. Yeah, it'd be cool if it was all open. But businesses are businesses, right?
Sure.
Well, make money.
It gives us something to strive for.
Yeah. Just love the digital twin piece, and it is going to happen. It's going to happen, but like I said earlier on, networks are, resilient by design, and it takes a little while to really make enterprise-wide progress. I think that's the right thing to say it.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a great final message for our audience. And Ryan, I want to thank you so much for joining The Gist and sharing your expertise with our community.
Yeah, great questions. Really enjoyed it, Thanks very much.
Wonderful. Yeah, we learned a lot. And we're excited to keep the conversation going. And we've got plenty more episodes headed your way with super smart people who are literally building the future of energy. So don't miss a single episode of The Gist. Hit subscribe to this feed, share an episode with a friend or coworker, and head to Energy Central for even more insights on this tech moving the power industry forward. And we'll see you next week for more.